Okay, good day everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to make a toasty grilled cheese sandwich. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is wash my hands. While I'm washing my hands, I'm going to fill up the sink with some nice warm soapy water. That way, when I'm finished with the dishes, they can get washed as soon as possible. I've also got some laundry on hand, a couple of towels, a nice washcloth, so that I'm ready to go. Okay, let's take a look at the gear you're going to need and the ingredients. Not a lot of gear this time. We've got a cutting board, flipper, we've just got a spoon and a knife for spreading, and then I'm going to use this big knife for chopping up the sandwiches when they're done. Then of course, we want a frying pan. We're going to use the one with the big glass lid. It's large enough to fit 4 sandwiches all at once, and we need this lid to trap the heat so that we can melt that cheese. Alright, for these sandwiches we're going to use some bread. I've got some multigrain wheat bread. I've also got a gluten-free bread. I'm going to make a couple of those. Then for the cheeses, we've got some medium cheddar, and then some Monterey Jack with jalapeno in it for a little bit of spiciness. We're going to use a little bit of mayonnaise in there, maybe a little dash of ketchup at the end, and of course we need some butter. And I'm going to include a little bit of seasoning in this. So there's some salt here, and we got some Italian seasoning there. And then we're also going to chop up some banana peppers and then sprinkle some of those in there too. So it's going to be a little spicy. I suppose if you're really not into spicy foods, you could always leave out the banana peppers, but they are pretty tasty. Now that we got clean hands, we've got all the gear assembled here. Next thing I'm going to do before I get started with anything else is preheat the oven. You want this frying pan nice and hot when those sandwiches go in there. So I'm going to put the heat onto medium. So, okay, that's about there. And then by the time we're done organizing sandwiches and they're ready to go in the pan, that pan will be nice and hot. So to make 4 sandwiches, we'll take about good heaping scoop with a tablespoon like this. Try to drain out most of the juice. You don't want all that juice on the cutting board. Say about that much right there. Okay. Now we're going to cut these using a chef's knife. It's nice because it's got a nice curved blade, and the chopping motion we're going to use is it's a combination between a chop and a slice, because we want to slice through that skin there. So the motion goes like this. I'm just going to leave them in a pile like this, and then I'm going to slice and chop. And notice the motion of the blade. It's going up and down, but it's also going back and forth, so that I'm slicing against the cutting board to make sure that I chop through all those tough skins. So we just keep going back and forth, and then once they're all spread out, drag them back to a nice pile and continue. And keep chopping until they're nice little fine pieces. Alright, that'll do. And I'm just going to keep them in this nice little bowl here. Go. I'm going to set that aside. I can now wash the knife and wash the cutting board. Okay, I've got 4 slices of the wheat bread, 4 slices of the gluten-free bread, and then I've got 4 slices of the Monterey Jack cheese and 4 of the cheddar. Each of these sandwiches is going to have 2 slices of cheese, 1 of each. And in between the slices of cheese, we're going to put the seasonings. So I'm going to set this aside. And I'm going to spread the bread out so that I can do all of them all at once, kind of like an assembly line. So I'm going to start with a little bit of mayonnaise. Now, it may seem a little strange to have mayonnaise in a grilled cheese sandwich, and some people don't really like mayonnaise, but I guarantee you won't really notice that it's in these sandwiches. What it's there for, the reason that the mayonnaise is in the sandwich is not necessarily for the flavor, but for what it's going to do. And what it's going to do is it's going to help the cheese stick to the bread, and it's going to add to the creaminess and the gooiness once that cheese gets all melted. So as you can notice, there's not a lot of mayonnaise on there. It's scraped pretty thin across the surface of the bread. I would put a little bit more on this gluten-free bread because it does tend to be a little bit dry. Alright. There we go. Mayonnaise is on there. Okay, now for the cheese. So I'm just going to deal out the cheese with 1 of these slices in each piece of bread, and then I'm going to put the seasonings in. So with the salt, take a little pinch and you just drop it on there from fairly high up. It doesn't take a lot, but what the salt's going to do is it's just going to improve the flavors of everything that's there. And then the Italian seasoning just adds a little bit of flavor for it. You don't need a lot, so you don't want any of these flavors to overpower the rest, so it's just a little sprinkling. And what I'm doing is I'm grabbing a pinch between my fingers like this, and then I'm kind of squishing it and grinding it grinding my fingers together to kind of crush the flakes. And there's oregano in here and some thyme and a couple other spices. Add some really nice flavor. Now we have the banana peppers. So there's about enough here for 4 sandwiches, so I want to take a little bit. I'm just going to start by putting it in the center of the cheese. It's not going to stay like that. I'm going to spread it out in a moment. Then I'm going to use it all up. Okay. Now this part's kind of important. You want to just spread those all out. So you don't want to have it all in one bite in the center, because then that would be a little bit overpowering. So I'm just going to spread it out as much as I can. And these are the little details of cooking that make a big difference in the way it tastes at the end. If you take the time right now to spread this out nicely, it makes a nice even flavor across every bite that you take of this sandwich. Alright. Try to spread it out as much as you can. There we go. Alright, good enough. Now for the second piece of cheese. Just lays on top of the first. So we've got a really good layered system going on here. And then close them all up. And we're ready to put butter. I've heard of people using mayonnaise on the outside because it does have quite a bit of fat in the mayonnaise, and that's what you need. You need some type of fat between the bread and the hot pan, which makes it actually grills it rather than just toasts it like a toaster. Okay, so now we're going to use a fair amount of butter for these. Not too much, but we want to cover the entire surface all the way to the edges with butter. That's going to make a big difference in the flavor. So this is what makes them nice and golden brown at the end. Now make sure that your butter is very soft, because really soft butter, really room temperature butter will spread much nicer. So make sure it doesn't have to be on there very thick, but you just want to make sure that it's spread all the way to the edges of the bread. All right. Okay, right to the edge. And we're going to do this to both sides. Now, sometimes you can butter one side and then put it in the pan and butter the other. I wouldn't recommend that though. It's very easy to burn your fingers that way. So I'm just going to turn it over on this countertop here, because I know that the countertop is very clean because I cleaned it before I started. The only problem is that's going to leave some butter behind. That's okay. Okay, flip them and do the other side. Okay, same deal here. Nice amount of butter, nice and soft butter right to the edges. There we go. Right to the edges, need a little more there. Okay, take another look. No, there's no spots that I missed there. We're all good. We're ready to put these in the pan now. Okay, so we're ready to put these in the pan. Got my flipper ready to go. And the pan is nice and hot. In fact, it might be a little too hot. See, it's been sitting for a while. It released a bit of smoke. So I'm going to turn this down a touch. And I think I'm going to cool the pan down with a little bit of water before I get started. Alright, we're at the right temperature now. Okay, so I'm going to lay each sandwich in there, and there should be room enough in this pan for 4. We want to do them all at once so that we don't run out of time in the class period. So I'm just going to lay them nicely in there and listen to the sound they make. You should start to hear that sizzle right away, but you don't want it to be too loud because we don't want these to cook too quickly, so they might burn before the cheese melts. And get those in there. There we go. And we're immediately going to put that lid on there. What the lid's going to do is it's going to trap the heat so that as the bottom cooks and it starts to grill that bread, it's going to melt that cheese as well. I've also got a small amount of water standing by, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in the pan next to the bread, and it's going to produce a bit of steam. But I'll wait for a little while before I do that. It should take about 2 to 3 minutes per side if you've got the heat on just right. And I can already start to see that the butter on top is starting to melt. By the time all that butter is pretty much melted into the bread, then I should be ready to flip these. But I'm going to check them. I'm not going to take my attention off of this for too long because it could go from golden brown and delicious to completely burnt in an awful hurry. So you want to keep your attention on that. Okay, it's been about 1.5 minutes. I've noticed that all the butter is pretty much melted on top there. And it sounds pretty sizzly, and I can see the cheese is starting to melt, so I think it's time to flip them over. But I'm going to shake the pan, and the sound that the bread makes against the pan, it sounds kind of crispy. So I'm going to take a look. So I'm just going to peek underneath one edge and just take a look. It's kind of hard with this many pieces of bread. I'm going to flip one just and see. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to flip the next one. So it's flipping them, you don't want to toss it, you just want to turn and drop it. There's 2. Let's check these ones. Alright, there's 3. Those look pretty good. That's the color we're going for, that nice golden brown color there. Alright. Don't want that cheese to fall out of there, so I'm just going to... There we go. Okay, at this point I'm going to apply a little pressure. Not too much, I don't want to squish the bread. But I want to make sure that that bread and the cheese is all nicely stuck together. Okay, so I'm going to kind of push these to the side. I'm going to put the water off to the edge here, and hopefully I'm going to be able to keep it away from the bread. We don't want it to spread all over and soak the bread. So I'm just going to put a little bit in the corner here. And you can see it immediately starts bubbling. So we put the lid on so we can trap that heat. And we just wait a little while until most of that water kind of bubbles away. And then I'm going to flip it one more time just to make sure that the other side is nice and toasty brown, and I'm going to make sure that all that cheese inside is nicely melted. Alright, I can see that the cheese is just melted and it's starting to drip down the side. Some of it actually made it onto the pan down there, so I have a feeling that these are done. Okay, I'm going to just leave this one a second longer because it looks like some of the water might have touched the bread. And we don't want that bread to be all soggy, so I'm going to leave that one a sec. Ooh, you can see the cheese is nice and gooey. I'm thinking these are going to be good. Let's just flip it over and take a look. Ooh, that looks pretty good. It looks like it could use another little bit on that side there. Let's check the other bread. Ooh, that's kind of perfect. That's what we want. Nice golden brown color like that. And the last one there, that one looks pretty good. These are ready to come off of there. One more little squish on these. Ooh. Those look delicious. Okay, I'm going to just put the lid back on and remove them from the heat. And I'm going to turn off the heat so I don't start a fire later. Okay, ready to cut these up. I've got some plates standing by so I can serve these right away while they're still nice and hot. Okay, let's take a look. Finished product. You can see that the cheese is all gooey and melting down the sides there. Yeah, I think those are going to be delicious. So I'm just going to slide them out of the pan. I think the cheese stuck together a little bit on that one. That's what we're looking for. We want all that cheese to be nice and melted. And there we go. I'm going to pass this off to the dish person. They can wash that up. And now for the cutting. You can cut these a number of different ways. I like to go corner to corner. It's easier to dip if you've got some ketchup or something like that to dip. So that one's going to go corner to corner. Set that one up with some ketchup or something to dip it in. You could also double that up, cut it that way, and cut it that way. Now I got 4 little slices, 4 corners there to deal with. Okay, serve that one up. These ones, you could also cut them that way. Or maybe you want to cut them this way. Totally up to you. And of course, when you're serving them, if you're putting these together for somebody else, you might want to add a little bit of ketchup to dip it in if that's something you like. But those are delicious looking sandwiches. You can see on the inside all the seasonings and everything like that. It's nice and melty and delicious. That's going to be a good sandwich. Well, that's basically it. Grilled cheese sandwich. Lunchtime classic. Real easy to make. But you can do all kinds of different things with that. I just kind of invented this one day standing in the supermarket. You could use any type of cheese you want. You could throw all kinds of interesting things in there. Play around with the seasonings. Limits only in your imagination. Okay, that was a tasty sandwich. But now that all the eating is done, it's time for everybody's favorite part, the cleanup. I wanted to make specific mention about a couple of things with the cleanup. Definitely with the dishes. So, let's get at it. When we're cooking with things that have oils in them, it's really important that you've got enough soap in the water, because the soap breaks down the oils and cleans it off of the dishes. So you got to make sure that there's enough in there. And you can tell that there's enough in there if you get a decent amount of bubbles. So we got some good bubbles happening here. So I'm going to start with the pan first, because I really want that pan to be nice and clean. So let's get at it. So I'm using a cloth. It's not enough to just use one of these scrubby brushes, because the scrubby brushes, they're good for scrubbing chunks off, but they don't get the entire surface clean. So I'm going all the way around, across, and I can tell that it's getting clean because the water's beating up. It's running right off there. And then I'm going to give it a nice rinse. Got to rinse off all of that soapy water off the inside and the outside. And then I'm going to dry off all the water while it's still wet. And there you go. Nice and clean, no smears. Ready for the next use. I'm going to put it away. Same thing with the lid. The lid wouldn't get very, very dirty. But just in case it got any butter on it, I'm going to make sure to clean it nice. Again, you can see the water's beating up and running right off of it. You can see the reflection of the light and everything. That's clean. And again, dry it off right away. Sometimes you might be tempted, if you're at home, to just clean those dishes and then leave them sitting in the sink or in the drying rack to air dry. Trouble is, sometimes if the water isn't totally clean, it'll leave water spots. There we go. Again, really clean, no smears. That's what we're going after. Okay, I'm going to put all the plates into the water so they can have a chance to soak a little bit in the warm water while I wash the others. Alright, nice and clean. Rinse it off. I'm going to do a few at a time and then I'll dry all of them. Listen to this sound. If your wet fingers make that sound on there, you know all the grease and stuff is off of those. I'm using very warm water. I'm using it nice and as hot as I can handle in the sink, and then again with rinsing. Okay, there's the plates. Now, with the knife, my recommendation when using knives in your cooking, this knife is super sharp. I'm definitely not going to just drop it in the sink and leave it there, because chances are I'm going to reach in there and get a handful of blade, and I don't want to cut myself. So I'm going to wash this thing. I'm not going to let go of it, and I've got the back of the knife, the part that's not sharp, pointed towards my hand, and that way I can slide the cloth along the blade, get everything off of there, and I'm going to rinse it, and I'm going to dry it without putting it down. Because the more times you have to pick this knife up, the more chances are that you're going to get a handful of blade and cut yourself. So that's nice and clean. Check out the metal. Super clean. No smears, no grease. Alright, and I'm going to put that back in the knife block right now. Okay, just a couple more things. Okay. There's the dishes, are all clean. I'm going to dry those, put them away. Okay, I've cleaned all the dishes. They're all dried off, ready to be put away. It's really important that you do a good job of the cleanup because, well, you don't want to contaminate your food and make somebody sick. And then it cuts down on the work later on. As you can see, everything's nice and shiny. There's no spots on the spoons. It's all super clean. So now we can put them all away. And now notice how I'm putting it back exactly where I found it. I'm not going to hide these things in some drawer somewhere. I'm going to put them back where I got them from so that when I want to use them next time, I know where they are. Alright, now, last thing I'm going to do is clean up all the surfaces. I use the stove, I use the sink, and I use the counter. All three of those areas have to be cleaned really well. As you can see, still I have a sink full of water, made a little bit of mess with the mayonnaise there, and I got to clean up the counter that I used, along with giving the stove a bit of a wipe. So I'm going to get started on that. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the cloth, squeeze as much water out of it as I can, and then before I empty the sink, I'm going to do the wiping. Now, there's nothing special going on here. I'm just going to use some of the nice clean soapy water from the sink to wet the cloth, and that's enough to disinfect mostly. Unless you're dealing with something like raw meat, soapy water is enough of. Okay, now I'm going to go wipe the surfaces and finish the cleanup here. And start with a nice wet cloth. It's been in the soapy water, so it's got some bit of just damp with soapy water. So I'm just going to wipe all the surfaces I've used. I'm not going to cheap out on this. I'm going to make real sure that there's no food residue left behind. Okay, and this section of counter over here, and then of course it's a good idea to wait until the stove has cooled down completely so you don't get a burn. I'm going to wipe all of that down. It's better to just do the proper job every time you use it so that you don't have a great big job later on after it builds up. Okay, so I drained the sink, but as you can see, it left some soap behind. So before I'm finished, this sink is going to be shiny. So it starts with rinsing all that soap down the sink, because if I leave it there, it's just going to all dry and it's going to leave a smeary, gross residue behind. Alright, and I'm going to use this cloth to wash the sides of the sink. Both sides of the sink. Make sure there's no gross stuff left behind. I think I'm done with this cloth. Before I put it in the laundry, I'm going to squeeze as much water out of it as I can. And so, last thing, just get my towel, wipe all the way around, and the handle, because I touched that. There we go, nice and shiny. If you get in the habit of just doing a super good cleanup every time you use the kitchen, you don't get a great big buildup that has to be cleaned up later on. Okay, and that's it. Just going to put away a couple of dishes and then I'm done. So I hope you guys learned something here, especially about the cleanup. See you later.